Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan Wegner, VP of Brand at SOG. Thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar. Gear is important to us, and in this episode, we're talking about ensuring you have the right tool for the job at the right time. The first step is to know how to prepare. Sarah Carlson, Emergency Manager, former CIA officer and author, will be talking to us about preparing and defining your EDC Essentials. If you enjoyed tonight's webinar, be sure to check out previous episodes available on YouTube and on our website. Later on, we'll be sending out a link to these in a chat during tonight's session. In a moment, Matt Crawford will do a quick intro with Sarah before she starts. And since we're doing this live, we'll be doing a questions and answer session at the end. So if you've got some questions at any time during the presentation, please use the Zoom Q&A function to send in your questions. We'll also have a poll that will open shortly. So take a moment to vote on it. We'll have another poll during the presentation that we'll send out at the right moment. So check it out. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Matt Crawford and Sarah Carlson to take a deeper dive into tonight's subject, preparing and defining your EDC essentials.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Sarah. Thanks for joining us. This is our third Observations With, and I think it's going to be a good one. We're going to start by putting up a poll. You and I talked about a poll, and I know it's going to help shape some of the discussion, but I think what else might help shape the discussion is that, as Jonathan said, you're a former CIA officer, and now you're an emergency manager in the Seattle area, and those two jobs, how do they sort of blend into what we're going to hear this evening?
As a CIA officer, I often served overseas in the Middle East and North Africa, so I spent quite a bit of time in that region. And so part of the requirement, especially for serving in a war zone, was to carry what we called a go bag. So it's very similar to an EDC or an everyday carry. Mm-hmm. And now in emergency management, same idea is to be prepared for all emergencies, but we have a lot more requirements than what we're allowed to or meant to carry. So, it's enough to survive for like 2 weeks. So that's sort of the similarity between the two.
Yeah. And I don't know if poll results are coming in. I can't see them. So I'm going to just go ahead and tell the folks who've joined us. The question is, do you already have an EDC prepared? And there's some choices there. If they could jump on that, that'll be great. Derek will need to share the poll results. So we're figuring things out here, even though it's the third time through. Well, as you get ready to go live here, I'm going to turn the Zoom keys over to you. And at some point, I'll find the poll results and just get in touch with you, okay?
Okay.
All right. So you're all...
So I'm going to share my screen now.
Okay. Yep. And you know what? We do have people answering this thing. So the question is, do you have an EDC prepared? And 67% of our viewers tonight do have an EDC prepared. 7% ask what's an EDC, and 16% say yes, but don't carry all the time, and 9% are no. So almost 2/3 do have an EDC prepared.
Sorry. That's good. So I'm going to talk more about what you might put in your EDC and how to tailor it to your area or what you're doing. So I will just go ahead and jump in. So as Matt mentioned, I'm a former CIA officer, and particularly in war zones, we had to carry a bag with us. So it's a little bit different than what I carry now. So in the CIA, it was sort of more about physical security and personal security. So much heavier emphasis on weapons. And the idea there was that, if I was in town and, captured or kidnapped or needed to run, that I would be able to have whatever I needed in my bag with me at all times. So different from now in that, there's not as much of a targeted threat, right? So overseas, I was targeted just because I was a CIA officer and had to be particularly careful because I stand out quite a bit, particularly in that region. So it was just a different mindset for what I needed to carry with me. And then now, as an emergency manager, I have to still carry things with me. I work quite a ways from my home, so I keep things in my car, and then I also carry things with me. So I'm going to talk about the difference between that as well. So first things first, we kind of already touched on the last two presentations that were given, but preparedness mindset, that's really like the baseline. And really what I do more as an emergency manager is helping people to get into that mindset and to think about why they need to be prepared and what they can do to do that. And I feel like that's really more about what you need to do like in your home. And so it's a little bit different than what we're going to talk about now, because this is what you're going to need to do outside your home. And here, with what we're doing now in the US and our concerns, I'm not going to just talk about physical security, despite the picture with the weapons. I'm going to talk about all hazards. So what you need to have with you to survive any hazard. The second one was the situational awareness. And, that's really important because that's your awareness of what's happening around you. So it doesn't really matter what you carry with you in your EDC or your go bag or whatever you want to call it. And it doesn't matter what you carry if you don't even know that something's going on around you, because you won't be ready to use it. Things I'm going to touch on in this are like for awareness, things like knowing the streets, right? You need to know what street you're on, but you also need to know the route that you need to take to get back to safety. So that is still an element of awareness that will play into your EDC. And then here, I think it doesn't matter what to carry if you're distracted. This is like really important if you're overseas or traveling, or you're in a city or like crime is really high, because distraction is a technique that a lot of criminals and terrorists use to target individuals. So this is something that I've even worked with like family members on. I think we've all been like in the grocery store in line checking out, and you're like flustered because you're trying to get your stuff back in your wallet and they're trying to help the next person. And I think maybe it's a little less so right now during coronavirus, but there's like stress, and it's very artificial that you need to, get out of the way, and you feel panicked, you feel distracted, and you have your wallet open, you're trying to get the groceries. And so it's stuff like that where, it's okay to just stop and take a minute and breathe, get your stuff back together, get it where it needs to go, and just take a minute to really focus on what's going on with you and what's going on around you. And then the last one here, I think, is the most important, particularly when it comes to weapons, is if you carry it, you should know how to use it. It's really important. So these are things that I carry in this photo. So my Glock, I actually carried a Glock overseas with the CIA as well. So I have quite a bit of training on how to use it. But these are all things that you should know how to use if you're going to be carrying them. So what is an EDC? When I think about an EDC, it's just what I carry every day. So it's whatever you have on your person, and it includes you as well. When I think about a go bag, it's more what I had overseas, where I needed to have a bag, like a small bag that could be versatile, that I could carry with me to get where I need to go. The last one is the bug out bag, and I think that one comes up a lot too, and that's more for like an evacuation. So in emergency management, there's two different kinds of protective actions that we talk about, and they pretty much cover the board across all hazards. So the two main ones are shelter in place and evacuation. So no matter what your hazard is, those are the two basic things that you're going to have to do in response. So shelter in place is just going to your safe place, which for most people is their home. So I will call it home throughout this, but it is whatever your safe place is. Some people have like a cabin in the woods or something else, but most people are going to need to get home like to their dogs or to their kids or whatever it might be. They're going to need to get there first. So whenever I think about what I'm going to carry, I think about how long it's going to take me to get to safety. So what I carry every day to like go to the grocery store is not going to be the same as what I might carry if I'm going into downtown Seattle, which is a bit of a distance from my house. So I like to tailor it to that. And the reason I don't carry as much when I'm going to the grocery store is because the goal, again, is to get to safety. So the grocery store is like a couple miles from my house. I know that I can get home in, an hour, maybe tops, depending on what's going on. So it won't take me that long to just walk home if I need to. The last one includes everything on you. Don't be John McClane. So Die Hard is the greatest Christmas movie of all time, without question. But in the movie, it's a really good example of, a lack of planning or like foresight into what might be happening, right? I think everybody knows he doesn't have his shoes on during this whole thing, and he ends up getting his feet cut up. So it's really important to think about like what you have on you and what shoes you're wearing, which might be something you don't normally think about. But your shoes, if you are quite a distance from your house and there's an earthquake and it takes out every overpass between you and home, you are going to have a lot of walking to do. So it's really important to have, appropriate footwear. And again, it's everything on you. So something you can really walk in. So this is, again, thinking about like how far you're going from your safe place and then tailoring what you're wearing or what you're carrying to how far you have to go and adapting it to that. So this is very specifically about the bag. So my significant other thinks I have a bag obsession, which is absolutely true. I have quite a few backpacks and handbags and all different kinds of bags. So the one that you use for your everyday carry or your go bag will really depend on what you like. So I use different bags for different things. It's really important for it to be sort of lightweight and easy to carry because you're going to be putting a lot of stuff in there and that stuff is going to be heavy. So it'll add up pretty fast. Another thing is for it to be accessible. So I'm left-handed, so like a lot of sling packs actually don't work for me because when you swing them around, I need the access point to be on the left-hand side and most of them are on the right-hand side. So just things to think about for that will fit you personally. Backpack versus like a handbag or a satchel. So backpacks are great because you can throw them on and you can run. So if you need to run, if like the threat is like very real or like it's a huge hazard for whatever reason, you have to get home now, you have to run, a backpack is going to be the easiest thing to run in. But I find like a handbag or a satchel is actually a little bit more secure. Like if you're going in a crowd or you're in like a big city or you're worried about crime, something that you can have like in front of you that you can be holding on to. My go bag overseas was a Timbuktu bag, and I absolutely loved that one. It was the smallest one. It was really easy for me to carry. Another thing I liked about it is that I could hear the Velcro and the snaps. So if somebody were trying to get in, it wasn't just like a one-step thing where they could pull up the opening, the flap, and get into it. They had to actually unsnap it. And then there was the Velcro, which of course would make noise. If you're using your everyday carry as like your briefcase or something, you might not want that because it's a really loud sound when that Velcro rips open. So those are just things to think about as well. And I've mentioned having to run or walk quite a few times. So another thing to really think about when it's the bag and you is your own physical fitness. When I was overseas and serving in war zones, I would work out all the time. And part of that was just to stay healthy, but part of it was because I knew I needed to run if I needed to escape. And I needed to be able to do it really quickly and over distance. So, that was always on my mind. My worst case scenario when I was overseas is that I would get kidnapped. So I was always thinking about what I needed to have on me and in me to be able to get out. The other part of this is we talked about mindset a little bit, but using your brain. It's part of that situational awareness and the training that I mentioned. You can train your body and you can go through all different kinds of exercises, but right now, some of them are a little bit hard to do during coronavirus, right? So you can also exercise your brain or train your brain. So what I mean is that, there's a lot of training out there for like stop the bleed or first aid or CPR, and those are all really great things to have. If you don't have, or you don't know how to do like navigation, you don't know how to use a compass or read a map, a lot of times you could take that training pretty easily at like your local REI store or something like that. Right now you can't. A lot of that stuff is still not open. So another way to start training yourself for disasters and for response is to think through how you might react. So when I do training right now on like active shooter, what I like to do is have everybody just kind of sit around a table and think about like, what would you do if somebody walked in with an automatic rifle right now into this room that you're sitting in? Like, how would you react? What would you do? Where would you go? And you just kind of talk through it. And that's something I do, with my loved ones. When I go out with them, we talk through, particularly with my mom, because she has some mobility issues. So that's another thing to consider is like who you're with. So talking through those different things that you can adapt your situation more appropriately to you and your family. The last thing is the clothing. I kind of already mentioned this as well, but having the appropriate clothing to be able to run over distance. And like everybody, I'll throw on shorts and flip-flops to go to the grocery store, but I also know that, again, I can get home in 2 miles in flip-flops and I'll be just fine. So really think about your everyday carry being not only what you put in a bag, but it's just what you have on you and in you as well. So this one is about tailoring to your environment. So out here in the Seattle area, we have volcanoes. This is a pretty specific hazard that not everybody shares. So it's really important to know what your hazards are where you live. So as an emergency manager, I have to say you can go online and look at your local emergency management office website. We're required by the federal government to identify all hazards in the local area. So if you're not sure or you don't really know what you need to be worrying about, you can go on there. There's usually a pretty easy to find link or something to the plan that identifies all of them. I think most people are probably familiar with things that are specific to their local area, but that's something that you do need to know so that you can adapt it or adapt your EDC. Because I might put something different in my EDC to prepare for a volcano than I would for, say, like a hurricane. So this came into play, again, I've mentioned a few times, like war zone versus city versus rural. Like I carry different things depending on where I'm at and depending on where I'm going. And always, always with the ultimate goal of how I'm going to get to safety, because nothing else matters except getting to safety. And that is the whole point of carrying an EDC. Other things that I'm going to be thinking about are the weather. So today I actually just attended the weather service briefing for like fall winter weather, and it's going to be cold. This year is going to be what is it, La Nina year, and so they're predicting it's going to be colder and wetter than normal. So that means snow. Means snow in the mountains. We don't get so much like down around the Seattle area, but again, like if I'm going to be going out into the woods or caught out overnight, I need things that will keep me warm. So that's something that I will be adding to my EDC and adding to the bigger pack I have in my car, so that I can be prepared to travel over distance, or if I get caught out overnight, and I won't freeze to death, because that will be a real concern this winter. So other people who live in, like, say, Florida, probably have the opposite problem, where their real concern is the heat and being able to adapt to the heat. So those are things that you want to think about. And again, with the hazards being like high wind or flooding, like flooding here is really normal. We get flooding all the time. So that might not be something somebody else is as familiar with. So it's really about learning your hazards. Security, again, I didn't want to focus just on physical security, but it's definitely a part of it. I've been asked in several briefings lately about civil unrest and what we can expect. So, it's something that you should have in mind. And, even if you don't carry a separate bag or like a go bag with like a weapon or something in it, if you have concealed carry, like what you have on your person is still part of what you're carrying. I always carry a knife whenever I leave the house. That's just something, no matter what, I always take. So it's really thinking about security, what you're comfortable using, what you've been trained using, and again, how far you are from safety, how long you're going to need, or how long it's going to take for you to get there. So just thinking through, like, is a knife enough to get me from the grocery store to home if there's an earthquake? Is my Glock enough to get me from Seattle to my home if there's civil unrest? So those are things that I'm constantly thinking through. So anybody who's familiar with hiking, most people out here in the Pacific Northwest are, these are the 10 essentials. So this is what, the whole outdoor community recommends that you carry with you when you're going hiking into the woods. This is the essential items that you should be taking with you. So they are navigation. So I already mentioned sort of the map and compass. And, if you don't know how to read like a topographic map, or you're not familiar with your streets or your area or where you're going, it'd be great to be able to go and get training on that. But even if you just sort of get in the car and drive around and learn your streets, I think most people would tend to travel from like point A to point B, and they go the same way every time. This is another thing that we're required to do at the CIA as well, is use alternate routes. So we were not allowed to use the same route every time we traveled somewhere. So you want to take the time to learn your neighborhood, to learn different ways that you can get to places, because you're going to need to have that knowledge to be able to get to your safe place if you're out and about. The next one is sun protection. As I mentioned, that it's probably not a concern out here in the Northwest for the next few months, but most of the time it is. You're going to want something like sunglasses or a hat or sunblock. Insulation is the one I mentioned about layers and warmth. Like that's the one that's always on my mind out here, because it never really gets that warm. So always have like extra gloves, extra hats. One caution is the those hand warmers that you can get, where you like open up and they get the air and like your hands feel warmer. But those make you feel warmer, but they won't necessarily protect you from hypothermia. So just be really cautious if that should not be your only source of warmth. Illumination. This is flashlights and headlamps, and I also have way too many of these. I have quite a few different kinds of illumination. I have those little button lights stuck on pretty much everything. One of my friends who was a Navy SEAL taught me 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So I like to always have extra things that I think I'm going to have, and that's certainly one of them. Is if you're traveling at night, and again, going into the winter months here, it gets dark quite a lot. So again, it's learning your environment and how to adapt to your environment. We're going to need some extra light as it gets darker and darker, earlier and earlier here. First aid. I have a bunch of first aid kits too. I actually used to be an EMT, an emergency medical technician. So one tip I would recommend, so anybody who has sort of one of those set standard kits that you can buy like REI or whatever, a lot of people forget to take off like the zip wire or the zip line before putting it in their bag. Never forget to take off open it all up, see what you have, make sure you know where everything is and that it's easily accessible. Another just sort of side tip, I also volunteered with search and rescue. So if you were to come across somebody, say there's a disaster, say there's an earthquake, and you want to help them and you don't want to use your own first aid kit, one thing you can do is to look in their supplies if they are carrying a bag or something like that, and use their first aid kit on them, and use theirs first. So moving on, fire. So this is like matches or a lighter, whatever you need to start a fire to create warmth, to cook food. That one I don't carry necessarily all the time, but like throwing an extra lighter in your bag it's small, won't take up much space. It's really handy when you need it. Tools, this is going to be other things like the weapons that we already kind of talked about. Nutrition, and then hydration is food and water, which I'll get into in a minute. So now I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, but before I do, I just wanted to, again, emphasize that in this time of coronavirus, it's important to also have masks and hand sanitizer, stuff like that, particularly if you are evacuating to a shelter or to something that is not your normal safe place, or to like a friend's house or something like that. Just make sure you throw some extra masks and hand sanitizer in your bag. See if it'll let me do this. Okay, so I just wanted to show a few things before we get into the Q&A. So we talked about the medical kit already in that. So water, I just wanted to show a couple options. This is particularly to people who want to like pack light or keep things light. So we have iodine tablets, which I think are nasty and disgusting. And then we have things like Life Straw, and then we have things like you can get like a water purifier pump, where you can just carry a water bottle. There are a lot of different kinds of options. If you're trying to travel light and you're trying to keep it less expensive, the iodine tablets are a really good idea, because if you're dying of thirst, you're not going to care what the water tastes like. There are other things too, like if you're traveling, as I mentioned, if you're going to have to stop or go to a place that you're not familiar with, it is not your safe place, a doorstop, a rubber doorstop. I carry one of these whenever I travel. It's really handy for keeping doors closed. So if you're worried about your security and you're not sure what's going on around you or what the environment's like, that's a way to keep it closed. I also recommend it for anyone who's like an office or something like that, and you're worried about active shooter and your door doesn't have a lock. That's one way to also sort of buy you some time and slow them down. The last one I just wanted to show was so NOAA weather radio. That's a really good one to have if you are bugging out. And I keep it with me in my car. So I have a much bigger pack in my vehicle than what I carry. So again, like with everyday carry, it could be just what I'm carrying on my person and like maybe my wallet. If I'm going to do like a go bag or a bigger bag, it's like if I'm going to go into downtown Seattle and I need to, have enough to get me farther away from there and to potentially have to stay there overnight if I get stuck. The stuff I have in my vehicle is if I need to, stay somewhere several nights, or if I need to travel over a great distance. So that's sort of how I've adapted to my current environment. But again, I strongly encourage everyone to sort of check out their local hazards and to get familiar with them, and then to adapt what they carry on their person based on that. That is the end of my prepared remarks, but I can take questions.
Really great stuff, Sarah. And I noticed that we had some participants raise their hands, and so I'm just going to encourage them to go over to Q&A and type in their Q&A, and we can go over some questions that they might have. 3 participants have now raised their hand, and they could put their questions over there in the Q&A. So I do have some questions before we get to theirs, and one real question and one not so real. One real question: are you willing to die on the hill that Die Hard is a Christmas movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that a question?
Yeah. Okay. And then the other question I had is, you talked about the iodine pills and some of the other stuff that you put in your bag, your nutrition, and I know that stuff has a shelf life, but do you how often do you go back in and check that and make sure it's what it needs to be? I mean, how often are you looking at the stuff in your go bag that you may not use for months or years at a time?
I look at my stuff pretty regularly just because it's part of my job as well. So I go through it at least once a year and make sure that everything is still up to date. So yeah, like the iodine tablets, any like medicines you have in one of these pre-packaged first aid kits, like these are great. I love them, but the medicines all expire. So it's really important to either get a whole new one every few years or to just trade out the medicines. A really easy way I like to switch out the medicine is the travel section of any pharmacy is going to have like they have these like little tubes of like Benadryl and Tylenol and that kind of thing. And so you can easily just get a couple of those from the travel section and just throw it into the first aid kit you already have.
Makes perfect sense. And then some of our viewers there's a couple of questions that sort of twin themselves here. So one was like to hear your thoughts on OC pepper or bear spray for non-lethal solution when threatened on the street. And then somebody later on asked, do you recommend mace or pepper spray for women or for anyone?
Yep. Yes. Again, if you have it, just know how to use it and be comfortable using it. But yes, I have bear spray that I keep downstairs in the house on a high shelf so the kids can't get it. I have pepper spray that I keep in my car all the time. And I have just, again, another like small thing of pepper spray that I keep by my bed next to my Glock because I like redundancy. I like to have a couple of different things. So even though I'm carrying a weapon, I still like to have the pepper spray as well. And I keep it in my car because I have like a little slot right next to my steering wheel. So like if somebody's trying to get in my window or like I cracked it for whatever reason, which is a terrible idea. But if I had, then I could just spray it through the little crack in the window and get them and then drive off.
Got it. So you're a big proponent of pepper spray.
I like it.
Yeah.
I use it. Emily talked about this too, but like flashlights like this, I'm not going to turn it on, but it's steel. It's heavy. This is very similar to like the SOG one as well, although this one is not. But the end has like a sharp edge to it. So this one actually was given to me when I was serving overseas by a friend of mine who was special forces, and he wanted me to have something else just to be able to carry around in my hand. So I will do this. You can put your thumb on the end, and it's pretty good for like a stabbing device. Also, my mother again taught me. So for many years before I got any training on weapons. This is another one for like an economical type weapon if you want to carry one. So you'll get a 3-inch screw, just like a basic screw at the hardware store. Because again, it has the end where you can put your thumb on so you get some leverage and the end is very pointy. So it's just another like thing that isn't about, killing somebody. It's about getting away. So it worked, for many years. That's what I carried because I hadn't had the training on all this other stuff yet.
And I think I've always heard that one of the advantages of a flashlight is that sort of blinding part that you can disorient an attacker with. So you might not even have to get to the point where you need to hit the attacker with it.
Yeah, there's a lot that you can do for personal security. I feel like I could talk about that topic in itself for quite some time. A lot of it just depends on what your goal is with it, right? If your goal is to hurt somebody enough to be able to break free and get away and run, and like you're confident you can outrun them or you can get to safety, then that's great. Something like, my Glock, that's not about getting free and running away. I'm trained on it, and if you shoot to kill, and you shoot till the magazine is empty. That's the training I got, and that's how I use it. So it depends on the purpose.
Right. Going to twin a couple of questions here that are coming in. One is, do you add any additional medical supplies to your basic first aid kit? And then somebody asked about prescriptions. So I think, I'm going to ask you, but what do you do about prescriptions? And would you add those as medical supplies to your basic first aid kit?
Yes, absolutely. I would definitely, if you have prescriptions that you have to take, have those on hand. So like for an earthquake, you can't really plan ahead for that, as well as like a hurricane. So if like, you know, a hurricane's coming, see if you can get some extra that will get you by until you can get back to the pharmacy. But if you're able to get like an extra month's supply, you know, that would be great. We tell people out here to be 2 weeks ready. The reason for that is our worst kind of disaster, natural disaster, is an earthquake. So if the big one happens, we think we're going to be pretty well cut off because there's really only one main highway in and out of the whole area. So we train people to be 2 weeks ready. So even if you can just get an extra 2 weeks supply, that would be great. I had long talks with you know, a dear friend of mine who lives in Florida about like, what if the power goes out? She's diabetic. How do you keep the insulin cold? So like getting like a Yeti thermos and putting tons of ice in there and then putting that inside another cooler or something, like whatever you can do just to ahead of time if you know something's coming. That the trick is if you don't know it's coming, but as much as you can to prepare. And then as far as extra stuff I put in mine, yes, I do. I have a lot of tourniquets, actually. So,
any particular tourniquet brand that you would recommend?
No, just tourniquet.
Just tourniquet.
And, even like if you have the ability to do like a training course or something like that on disaster first aid, because they'll get into specifics on how to use whatever is in the room to be able to do something like that. So I've taken and helped with a lot of like stop the bleed training. So that is really tailored more towards like active shooter, like bullet wounds. And that's a lot of what I did with the training with CIA as well, because that was our main concern, is getting shot. So, or blown up, but you know, you can't really do much about that. So, well, you can do less. I shouldn't say that. But yeah, it was, you know, a real concern. So we had a lot of medical training. Quick clot, I don't recommend for in the US. We had it overseas, but that was like, if I'm out in the middle of the desert and we're ambushed and it's going to be like days and I'll bleed out and die if I don't have it. So I wouldn't recommend that, but a tourniquet, like, yeah, it was like a standard. I have a bunch of them. I have them stashed in all my bags and then kind of around the house. So I have quite a few of those.
Yeah. As you were talking, there was I guess an observation. Somebody said that one of the first things they did when they moved to a new neighborhood was they started to bike and walk around the neighborhood and learn the streets, like where the dead ends are and where the connectors are. And I thought that was a really good idea. And then that sort of twins in with a question somebody had about maps. And we talked about, as we were warming up, we talked about the compass around your neck. Do you prefer paper maps over digital maps? And I know she had a map in a compass in your EDC kit. So if you want to talk a little bit about what kind of maps you prefer and navigation tools and sort of riff on that, that'd be awesome.
So I like both. I love paper maps, but it is a lot easier to use like a phone and use an electronic map or an app. The problem with relying on an app or your phone is that if you lose power or if the Wi-Fi goes out or cell service goes down, you're not going to be able to use it. So if there's an earthquake or other major disaster that affects many people in any particular area, cell service is going down. Like it just is. So you can't rely on it. So that's why it's important to know, if you can, just like offhand, how to get out of there, because if it's something like an active shooter, you're going to need to run and run fast, and you're not really going to be have time to think through all the particulars. So I would recommend trying to be as familiar as you can with the streets. But when I travel overseas, I always get a paper map, and I do that. Like I have paper maps even of Washington in my car, because it's important to be able to have that if the power goes out, if Wi-Fi goes down, if cell service is out. That I don't know all the roads in the whole state, so being able to have that to refer to. I'm a big hiker as well, so I love topographic maps. They're a little bit different to read, so that's another one where if you can buy some, even if you just start looking online at videos and stuff, sort of teaching yourself how to read a topographic map and what the little twists and turns mean. The only thing with maps, especially when traveling, they can actually be a security risk if you're just staring at them, like this in particular, with it in front of your face. So, you know, even if I'm traveling overseas and I'm in a new city and I'm worried about my security, even if I'm not worried about my security, I don't like stopping and having to refer to a map. So I will take the map and I will fold it down to like the portion that I need of the city. And then I will learn, like just quickly memorize the route to get to where I'm going. And I might have to take it out and refer to it a couple times if I'm going on like a long walk or something. But it's better if you can learn the route ahead of time and be at least a little bit familiar with it instead of like constantly stopping to refer to a map.
Yeah. When you check into a hotel, do you look around and sort of figure out what streets run parallel? And
yeah, first you have to sort of orient yourself to the map, right? So you can see where the hotel is, but you're not really sure, like if I go out the door and to the left, am I going like towards the Coliseum if you're in Rome, or so you have to take a minute to orient yourself. So learning the street you're on and then the crossroads, it's really important. But yeah, I like to walk around and just get familiar with things. You mentioned the compass, and I meant to say this during the briefing about everything that you carry on you being important. So when I was overseas, I actually had a working compass as a necklace because I figured everything that I had on me was critical. It's a little bit less so now that I'm sort of home and in my comfortable environment, but it's all those little things that you can do that if you really think through like what you're wearing and what you're putting on, that it's important. And actually on that note, I'm going to mention this too, hair tie. For women specifically, one of my biggest pet peeves in life is action movies where the women have their hair down, because it blocks your vision and you can't see. And the first thing that I do when I go hiking or I get in a dangerous situation where I'm gonna have to really like book it, I put my hair back. So it just opens up the peripheral vision a little bit more.
So tell me about Die Hard. Did the women have their hair up in Die Hard? I don't really remember. One of our first questions, and this sort of caught me because I never had heard this before, was about the doorstop. So some people want to know a little bit more about that doorstop. Is it solid, and where did you get it? And
yeah,
where did that idea come from?
It's any hardware store. So this is just a rubber one. The rubber ones work better than the hard plastic, particularly on carpet. If it's a plastic one, it'll just slide. They make some now where you can get where it's hard plastic, but there's like an alarm thing where it actually make an audible alarm. You just have to put batteries in it. And they make different devices that you can use to basically lock the door without a lock. Some of them you have to actually open the door first to put it on there. And so you want to be really aware of that because you don't want to be like opening and closing doors and alerting people to where you are in order to lock it. It works pretty well. It's not going to stop somebody from getting in, but it's going to give you time to either keep running if you have an exit behind you, or to like grab something that you might be able to use, like hit the intruder or potentially even hide. But if they run into like that doorstop, they're going to know somebody put it there, or think that maybe there's like a bookcase that fell down or something. I learned about that. We had to do travel training before I went overseas with CIA. So it was stuff like that. So like the doorstop, stuff like, never get a hotel room on the first floor. Always get like this, the second or third through like the seventh. And the reason for that is because fire trucks can't extend their ladders past a certain point, and the ground floor is the most dangerous for somebody trying to get in your window.
Interesting. Jessica Tyler asked, you mentioned your wallet, and what would you carry in your wallet? And I guess that's kind of a, do you look at your wallet as an additional bag? I know you like your bags, but is your wallet an additional place to carry some of those essentials you need for EDC?
Yeah, if all I'm carrying with me is my wallet, yeah, absolutely. So again, adapting for overseas versus here. Um, Overseas, I carried my passport with me everywhere. That was critically important because, if I were caught in an ambush or someone were trying to kidnap me and I had to run and I just had to get away and like try to get to the nearest embassy or safe place overseas, I think I would need to have my passport to be able to get out of the country. So it's really important to have. I know some people prefer to just lock them up, and I think that'll be a personal preference because there is, of course, the risk that it could get stolen. But my concern was about getting kidnapped, not about getting things stolen from me. So that was a little bit different. And then currency, so cash. Even in emergency management, they recommend always having $400 in your safe or wherever. So maybe not carrying it around, but $400 is sort of what they consider like the amount that you should have in your emergency supplies. Overseas, I carried cash, US dollars, and then I also carried different currencies for the countries all around the country I was in. So I'd pull out, like when I was in Libya, I had Libyan dinar, and then I got Tunisian dinar, and then Egyptian. So I had some currency from places that I might have to evacuate to. In the US here, I still carry my passport sometimes, not all the time. Oh, sorry. So if I'm going to be traveling, like closer to like the border with Canada, then I might have it in my bag just in case I need to like cross the border for whatever reason. But then, also having some cash on you is always a good idea. I like to do that. And then I'll throw an extra knife in my wallet. This one is my favorite, it's SOG. Hold it up right. So it's really handy for just carrying in my wallet because it's so small. If I don't want to have it visible on my person at all, it's really easy to slip in there. But that's my favorite for like having a small knife or something really small in there. Again, like that's the thing I always carry without fail.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I'm supposed to launch this poll and I'll do it now. And we're going to ask the folks who are still with us during this Q&A period what they consider the most important item in their EDC. So I'm going to launch that. Hopefully, do you see it, Sarah?
I
don't know
do.
if you can.
Yeah.
Good. Hopefully people will start coming in on that. And as they do, I just want to say that the knife that you have there, we have, not to make a shameless plug, but we have an updated version of that, the Ultra XR, which is lighter and has the XR lock and is everything that you have in that one, but just better, kind of. So there's my shameless plug.
That's okay. I like knives too. So I have quite a few. Yeah, I carried one. This one actually had a bunch of stuff out. This one's 0 tolerance. So you can open it like that. This is the one I actually carried in Libya with me. I would just stick this one in my boot because I wear boots every day. So I just tuck it in next to my ankle.
Well, it looks like the pretty decisive poll winner is knife at 64%. So 64% of people tonight thought that the most important item in your everyday carry was the knife, followed by shoes, Bruce Willis, and then pistol and cash are tied there. So we'll probably wrap it up here, but just talk a little bit about you. I guess you are a little bit, but your knife you think is probably your most important piece of EDC.
Yep, I always carry one with me. I mean, even if all you're going to be doing is like opening boxes or like cutting rope or whatever it is, like having something on you that you can defend yourself, I think it's really important. Gives me a sense of security and it's also a useful tool that you can do many different things with. So yeah, I really like having that on me. Shoes is another one. Like I keep in my car. I mentioned I have like all this gear in my car. So I keep like hiking boots and hiking shoes in my car as well. Shoes are a really important one. All of it's really important, right? But I will say, going back to other like standards. So the rule of 3, I think a lot of people have probably heard about, but the rule of 3 is like you can go 3 seconds without oxygen, 3 no, 3 minutes, 3 seconds, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So water is a really big one. And I didn't really go into it all that much, but food and water are really important. But water, if you're running and you're in stress, if you're under duress, you are going to get thirsty just from being stressed. And then add to that running, you're going to get really thirsty. So having a way to get water is really important.
I always carry water in my vehicle. I mean, for a bunch of reasons. Thirst is one of them. Cleaning something off is another. You know, the radiator blowing is probably the third one. But Sarah, really good stuff tonight. You're our third guest in these observations with series that we've been doing here for SOG. This has been recorded and will be live both on YouTube and the SOG webpage probably within the week. And we'll push out a link to that so folks can see it. I know it's hard sometimes to get people to come together for a live event in the evening, and so we'll have that. And we have our first two with Jason Harper, which was late end of September, and then with Emily Valentine a couple of weeks ago. Those are already up and on the SOG website and on YouTube as well, and you'll be joining them. And I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight. It was really great.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.